Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
The smell of pesticides and detergents are among the strongest triggers for me. I always have my inhaler with me, and I learned over the years to manage it. My apartment has air purifiers in every room, and I use only fragrance-free cleaning products. The trade-off is that I have to be really careful when I go out, especially to places like grocery stores where cleaning products are sold. I've had a few close calls over the years, but nothing prepared me for what happened that day. The whole thing started because I needed to do a quick grocery run. I was working on a big project deadline and had been living off whatever random stuff I had in my freezer. I finally ran out of frozen breakfast burritos, which are basically my survival food when I'm busy. Plus, I was down to my last roll of toilet paper, so I really had to make this trip happen. I usually shop at this particular store because the layout is familiar to me. I know exactly where everything is, and more importantly, I know which aisles to avoid. The cleaning products are normally in aisle 7, and I just never go there. Simple as that. But when I got to the store that day, I noticed they had put up signs saying they were rearranging sections. My usual toilet paper aisle had been moved somewhere else. I grabbed a basket and headed straight to the frozen section first. Got my burritos without any problems. Then I started wandering around looking for the toilet paper. I went down the paper goods aisle, the pharmacy section, even checked near the diapers thinking maybe they moved it there. Nothing. I was getting a bit frustrated because I really needed to get home and finish my work. That's when I found myself at the start of what used to be the pet food aisle. Except now it was full of air fresheners, cleaning sprays, and laundry detergent. The smell hit me immediately even from the entrance. My chest started to feel tight, and I knew I needed to get out of there fast. I turned around and started walking quickly in the opposite direction. Behind me, I heard someone yelling at me to come back. I figured she was talking to someone else. I mean, I'm clearly a customer with a shopping basket, not wearing any kind of uniform. I kept walking, focusing on getting to cleaner air. I finally found the toilet paper in what used to be the seasonal aisle and grabbed the pack. I was heading toward the checkout when I felt someone grab my elbow. I turned around to see this woman, maybe mid-30s, with her face mask pulled down under her chin. She had on the ugliest shade of red lipstick I'd ever seen. The smell of air fresheners was all over her, and being that close to her made my chest tighten even more. She called me a witch and said she was talking to me. I asked her to please put on her face mask because I was high risk. I took a few steps back, but she followed me. She told me I couldn't tell her what to do and that she tells me what to do. She insisted I worked for her and demanded I come back and smell some products for her to tell her which one was better. I started backing away more, but she was persistent. I told her I didn't work there and couldn't be around those products because I have asthma. She called me a liar and said she saw me running away when she needed help. She said that's not how you treat customers. What happened next felt like slow motion. She took the cap off one of the bottles and sprayed it directly at my face. Then she did it again with the second bottle. She told me to smell them and tell her which one was better. The attack started immediately. My chest felt like it was being squeezed by a vice. I dropped my basket and started digging through my backpack for my inhaler. My hands were shaking and I could feel my airways closing up. She grabbed my hand and told me to help her first, then get to my drugs. She called me a brat. I had to push her away to get to my inhaler. She stumbled backward a few steps, looking shocked that I had the nerve to defend myself. I got my inhaler out and took 2 puffs, then another 2 when the first round didn't help enough. I was still trying to catch my breath when I heard her voice again, this time much louder. She was yelling that there I was and demanding someone fire me and arrest me. She wanted me in jail. She was dragging a manager over to where I was sitting on the floor. The manager looked horrified when he saw me. He asked if I was okay and helped me stand up. He started collecting my scattered belongings. I told him I was better now, but just needed to sit down and catch my breath. Karen interrupted and said no, he was going to fire me first. She said I could breathe on the way to the police station for assaulting an elderly person. I looked at this woman who was maybe 35. The manager told her to shut up and called her an idiot. He completely ignored her screaming and led me to his office, where I sat by the window to get some fresh air. Karen followed us, yelling the whole way about how I was a terrible employee and needed to be fired immediately. 5 minutes later, there was a knock on the office door. The police had arrived. Someone must have called them when they saw the commotion. Karen yelled that it was, finally, time for justice. The officer looked between the three of us, clearly trying to figure out what was going on. The manager asked me if I wanted to press charges. Karen's face went completely blank, like she couldn't process what she was hearing. She demanded to know what he was talking about and insisted she was the one who was assaulted by this employee. I finally had enough energy to respond properly. I told her how she could be so stupid when I obviously didn't work there and had very obviously just had an asthma attack right in front of her. I asked her who she thought she was and called her a witch. The police officer asked us each to tell our side of the story. I explained everything that happened, starting with how I was just trying to shop and avoid the cleaning products because of my asthma. Karen told some ridiculous story about how I was a rude employee who refused to help her and then attacked her when she complained to management. The officer looked completely done with her nonsense. He asked the manager if there was security footage, and the manager immediately pulled it up on his computer. You could see everything clearly, me shopping normally, avoiding the cleaning aisle, Karen grabbing me and spraying the air fresheners in my face, me having the asthma attack, and her trying to drag me back to help her shop. The officer told Karen he was going to need her to come with him. She asked what he meant and insisted I was the one who pushed her. He explained that she had assaulted someone with a known medical condition and that was a serious charge. He put her in handcuffs while she screamed about how unfair it all was. The manager gave me my groceries for free and offered to call an ambulance, but I told him I was used to managing my asthma and would be fine once I got home. I got home, ate my burrito, and spent the rest of the evening working on my project. A few weeks later, I got a call from the prosecutor's office. Karen had been charged with assault and reckless endangerment. She ended up pleading guilty and had to pay a fine plus cover my medical expenses for the inhaler refills I needed after the incident. The store manager told me later that Karen tried to come back to the store the next week, demanding to speak to corporate about the terrible treatment she received. He had to explain to her that she was banned from all locations and would be arrested for trespassing if she returned. Some people never learn. 9 years ago, I was in a really tight spot. I'm a woman of color living in the South, and finding decent housing had been one challenge after another. Let's just say that some people weren't exactly welcoming when I showed up to view apartments. I was getting desperate when my friend told me he was moving out of his 3-bedroom place and offered to put in a good word with his landlord. The landlord was this middle-aged white woman who seemed nice enough during our meeting. She agreed to rent me the apartment, 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths. I thought I'd finally caught a break. The rent was reasonable, and I was just grateful to have found somewhere my kids and I could call home. After I moved in, I introduced myself to the neighbors. There was a surveying company that rented the unit next to mine and a co-worker who lived down the hall. Both gave me the same warning. The surveying company owner told me to be careful with her and that she wasn't what she seemed. My co-worker was even more direct, telling me to watch myself because she'd caused problems for everyone in the building. I figured they were just trying to scare me into leaving. It wouldn't have been the first time someone tried to make me uncomfortable enough to move. So I brushed off their warnings and settled in. The first spring rainstorm showed me they weren't being dramatic. Water started dripping from my ceiling in multiple spots. I counted 8 separate leaks. I called her immediately and explained that my ceiling was leaking badly from the storm. She told me that it happened sometimes and that she'd take care of it. Her idea of taking care of it was throwing a tarp over part of the roof, not fixing the actual problem, just covering it up temporarily. The leaks continued, and soon I had buckets placed strategically around my living room and bedroom. A few weeks later, I was cooking dinner when I heard a loud crash from the living room. A whole section of ceiling had collapsed right where my kids usually played. Thank God they were at school. I called her again, more urgently this time. I told her that a piece of my ceiling had just fallen down and that it was dangerous. She needed to fix it properly. Her response was dismissive. She reminded me that she put a tarp up there and that should help. I explained that the tarp wasn't working, that there were still 8 leaks, and now my ceiling was falling apart. She said she'd look into it. She never did. Instead, the constant moisture brought out the roaches. At first, it was just a few here and there. Then they multiplied. They completely took over one of my kitchen cupboards. Opening it meant getting swarmed by hundreds of the nastiest bugs you've ever seen. I do this frantic dance trying to get them off me while my kids screamed. We stopped using that cupboard entirely. I spent my own money on sprays, bombs, and poison. Nothing worked. Those roaches had claimed that cupboard as their kingdom. But the leaks and roaches weren't the worst part. The building was supposed to have central heat and air conditioning. Karen refused to turn on the system. During the summer, we were cooking in our apartments. During the winter, we were freezing. I had to buy space heaters and dress my kids in layers just to stay warm. We still shivered through most nights. One particularly cold morning, I woke up to no water. The pipes had frozen. I called her to report that the pipes were frozen and there was no water in the building. She told me she didn't know pipes could freeze without heat. I explained that this was exactly why buildings needed heat. You couldn't just leave tenants to freeze and expect everything to work normally. She refused to turn on the heat, saying it was too expensive. I contacted the health department, hoping they could force her to make repairs. The inspector came out, took some notes, and gave me the most useless advice ever. He agreed the place was pretty bad, but told me if it was really that terrible, I should just move. If I could afford to move, I would have already done it. I was stuck. I did some research and learned that in our state, tenants could withhold rent if they made a good faith effort to get repairs done and the landlord refused. So I stopped paying rent and documented everything. That got her attention real fast. She demanded that I pay my rent immediately or she'd evict me. I told her I'd pay rent when she fixed the leaks, got rid of the roaches, and turned on the heat like she was supposed to. She refused to fix anything and insisted I pay rent. I reminded her that it was perfectly legal under state law for me to withhold rent under these circumstances. In November, she served me an eviction notice. I contacted legal aid for free advice. The lawyer told me she had to take me to court to evict me, and with all the evidence of her refusing to maintain the property, there was no way a judge would rule in her favor. The eviction date came and went. Nothing happened. She was all talk. She started showing up at my door regularly, trying different tactics. First, she tried bargaining, offering to give me my security deposit back if I'd just move out quietly. I told her to fix the apartment and I'd pay rent, but otherwise I was staying. She complained that I was being unreasonable and reminded me it was her building. I pointed out that she should act like a responsible landlord then. When begging didn't work, she tried intimidation. She told me she had friends in town and could make things difficult for me. I reminded her that I had documentation of every code violation in the building and could make things difficult for her too. Her next move was turning off the water to my unit, which is completely illegal. Luckily, the half bath still had running water, so we managed. She probably thought this would make me more reasonable about moving. I told her that turning off utilities was illegal and she was just digging herself deeper. She never took me to court because she knew she'd lose. I lived in that apartment rent-free for 6 months while I saved money and looked for a new place. When I finally found somewhere better, I had enough saved up for the security deposit and first month's rent, thanks to all the money I'd saved by not paying her. Now here's where things get interesting. Most people would clean their old place before moving out. Not me. I had 6 months of frustration to work through. I let my kids use the bathroom that didn't have water running to it. My son somehow managed to break the other toilet so it wouldn't flush at all. I piled trash in the middle of every single room. I left old food in the refrigerator, then turned off the power so it would rot in the heat. But the masterpiece was that roach-infested cupboard. I managed to prop it open from across the room using a long stick, then left it that way. But with no air conditioning and rotting food everywhere, that apartment became a roach paradise. By the time I was done, that place went from a run-down apartment to a dark, hot, stinking hellhole crawling with bugs. I'll never know exactly how she reacted when she found it, but I like to imagine her face when she opened that door and got hit with the smell of rotting food and the sight of roaches everywhere. After 6 months of her trying to intimidate me into leaving a place I paid rent for, she finally got what she deserved. I work nights at a local warehouse, which means I sleep during the day and I'm awake when most people are getting ready for bed. It's not the most social schedule, but it pays the bills and keeps me busy. I've been living in this converted house for about 3 years now. The building used to be a single family home, but the landlord split it into 4 small apartments with a shared entrance area downstairs where all our mail gets delivered. The setup isn't bad, really. There's me, 2 elderly tenants who keep to themselves, and then there's my downstairs neighbor. Let's call him Karen because honestly, he acts just like those entitled women you see in viral videos, except he's a guy in his 30s who thinks the world owes him everything. When I first moved in, I thought he was just having a rough patch. Maybe he'd gotten mixed up with the wrong crowd or was going through some personal issues. I tried to be understanding when his friends would show up at all hours, when packages would go missing, or when I'd hear loud arguments coming from his apartment at 3 in the morning. But after 6 months of this, I realized this wasn't a rough patch. This was just who he was. Karen deals drugs. Hard stuff too, not just marijuana. I know because he told me himself during one of our earlier conversations when he was trying to act all tough and intimidating. He bragged about how business was good and warned me to mind my own business if I knew what was good for me. The problem is, his business became my business real quick. His customers would ring my doorbell at all hours looking for him. They'd pound on my door, wake me up from my day sleep, and get aggressive when I told them they had the wrong apartment. Some of them were clearly high or desperate, which made these encounters even more unsettling. Then there were the break-ins. Cars on our street started getting broken into regularly. Houses, too. My elderly neighbors upstairs had their shed broken into twice. The woman next door had her purse stolen right out of her car. When I asked Karen about it, he just shrugged and said his friends sometimes got a little carried away. But that wasn't his problem. His problem was that he kept leaving the main entrance door propped open so his customers could come and go freely. I come home from work to find our shared entrance area trashed, with broken glass and cigarette butts everywhere. Sometimes there'd be used needles in the corners. I told him he needed to stop leaving that door open because it wasn't safe. He snapped back that it wasn't my door and he could do whatever he wanted. I reminded him that it was all of our doors since we all lived there. He said his friends needed to get in somehow. I suggested they could knock like normal people. He got defensive and told me he didn't tell me how to live my life, so I shouldn't tell him how to live his. But the worst part was the packages. I order things online pretty regularly since I work nights and can't always get to stores during normal hours. The delivery drivers would leave packages in the shared entrance area or sometimes just dump them in the front garden. I get home from work to find nothing but empty space where my package should have been. The first few times I gave Karen the benefit of the doubt. Maybe someone else took them. Maybe they got delivered to the wrong address. But then I started noticing a pattern. Every single package that got stolen was taken within minutes of being delivered. And Karen always seemed to have new electronics or clothes showing up right around the same time my stuff went missing. I confronted him about it multiple times. I asked him if he knew anything about my stolen packages. He denied it and said it was probably just some random person walking by, claiming the neighborhood had gone to hell. I pointed out that the package was delivered at 2 in the afternoon, so someone would have had to be watching for it. He asked what I was trying to say. I told him my packages kept disappearing, and he was the only one around here who had sketchy people coming and going all day. He got defensive and said I couldn't prove anything. And that was the problem. I couldn't prove anything. I complained to the landlord, but without evidence, there wasn't much he could do. I called the police a few times, but they said package theft was hard to prosecute without catching someone in the act. The breaking point came when I had over £250 worth of items stolen in a single week. I'd ordered a new laptop for work, some clothes, and a few other things. All of it disappeared the day it was supposed to be delivered. I was furious. That's when I decided to get creative. I bought a small security camera and installed it in the shared entrance area, positioning it so it had a clear view of where packages usually got left. I didn't tell anyone about it, including the other tenants. Then I set up my trap. I kept the boxes from some legitimate packages I'd received and filled them with random items to give them weight. An apple, some plastic bags, a few magazines. I sealed them up so they looked like real deliveries and placed them in the usual spot where packages got left. I went upstairs to my apartment and watched through the camera feed on my phone. Within 5 minutes, one of Karen's friends showed up. He looked around, grabbed both fake packages, and headed straight for Karen's apartment. Got him. I called the police immediately. The officer who answered was impressed with my setup and said they'd been looking for a way to catch these guys. I told him I had it all on video if they needed it. He said they'd be right over. By the time the police arrived, Karen's friend had already left the building. I could see him through my window walking away with a backpack that was definitely stuffed with more than just my fake packages. The officers took my statement and the video evidence. The officer complimented my work and said they'd put out a description of the guy and keep an eye on the building. I told him there was something else he should know. I was pretty sure Karen was dealing serious drugs out of his apartment, because there was constant foot traffic with people coming and going at all hours. He said they'd look into that too. A few weeks went by and I didn't hear anything. Then one morning at 7 a.m. my phone rang. It was the same officer who'd taken my statement. He told me he needed me to open the front door quietly and quickly, then go back to my apartment and stay inside. I asked what was happening. He just repeated his instructions, opened the door, and go straight back upstairs. I went downstairs and opened the main entrance door. The officer was standing there with what looked like a small army of plainclothes police officers hiding behind cars and around corners. She motioned for me to go back upstairs immediately. From my window, I watched as about 15 officers stormed into the building. I could hear them shouting commands and then a loud crash when they broke down Karen's door. The raid lasted about an hour. They brought out several people in handcuffs, including Karen. But the most satisfying part was watching them carry out box after box of drugs and drug paraphernalia. It was like watching a whole criminal operation get dismantled. Later that day, the officer called me back. She thanked me and explained that my video evidence helped them get a warrant. They'd seized a significant amount of illegal substances, and my neighbor had been running a pretty serious operation. I asked what would happen now. She told me he'd been arrested and charged with multiple drug-related offenses, and that they'd also been in touch with my landlord about the situation. Within a week, Karen was evicted. I came home from work to find all his stuff in garbage bags on the curb and a notice taped to his door. The landlord had terminated his lease immediately due to illegal activities on the property. That was a month ago. Karen's mail is still being delivered to the building, but there's nobody there to pick it up. Every day I walk past the growing pile of letters and packages addressed to him, and I smile. His friends still show up sometimes, looking confused when they realize he's not there anymore. The building has been peaceful ever since. No more random people ringing my doorbell at all hours. No more packages disappearing. No more broken glass in the entrance area. The elderly tenants upstairs actually thanked me for getting rid of him. I still have that security camera installed, and I plan to keep it there. Not because I'm expecting more trouble, but because it's nice to have that peace of mind. Plus, I get a little satisfaction every time I see another piece of Karen's mail get delivered to an empty apartment. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.